The voice of TCU, Brian Estridge, with me. David Smoke on 365 Sports. TCU, Texas, coming up this weekend. Is this a year that we've seen a lot of Big 12 teams have success, Brian, winning close games, and then the next year it's hard to kind of match that, and just a couple of things have gone wrong, and then obviously they lost a tremendous amount of playmakers and talent?
Yeah, but you're right, though, David. I mean, it came down to one-score games last year for TCU, and they were successful in them. They had guys that would will their way to win. You know, guys like Max Duggan, obviously, who would do that. Quentin Johnston, who could take the top off of things. Kendra Miller, who would bust a long play when they needed it. But and they haven't had that playmaker this year to do that. They're losing one-play games or one-score games. I tell you the other thing that really stands out, David, is the fact that this group, is not taking the football away like they did last year. You look at the losses for TCU in Big 12 play, they got 0 takeaways. You can't win football games doing that.
You had the quarterback change again from Chandler Morris last year. That worked because Duggan took over, was in the Heisman discussion. With Hoover young and raw, he's got a gun. What has been his strength, and what are, besides maybe inexperience, is he working on?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different things. I think that, he can throw the football. He can make all the throws. There's no question. The problem is, with no quarterback behind him, he hasn't been able to use the second part of his game, which is his feet, which are pretty good. And the lack of the quarterback run game, as you know, with the Kendall Brown's offense, that's a really important part. And not having that, I think, has held this offense back. Here's the other thing. As good as Josh Hoover is, he's a freshman making, his fourth start, who we're asking to throw the football 50 times a game because the run game hasn't been there for TCU. And so I think that's been a real problem as well. Anytime you ask a freshman to throw it 50 times, mistakes are going to happen, and they have happened. And so I think those are the two big issues, the fact that there's not a quarterback behind him, so he hasn't been able to really get out of the pocket and show his wheels. And then secondly, because there's been no run game, he's been forced to throw it 50 times, and folks that, can confuse him and things of that nature. He's just a freshman, so, has nothing to do with his ability. I think those are the two things that add up.
And so here's Texas. They're rolling. They got fortunate, but they also really jumped on Kansas State and found a way to still win the game. They're really good, and this is a little bit of a different edge to them. This is not a team that's going to crumble like they could have against Houston, or like they did against OU, but did not against Kansas State, although that was one where K-State had it at the doorstep. They don't seem to have many weaknesses. They play hard. The defensive front is fantastic. They do have the young quarterback in Malik Murphy. What do you see here?
Yeah, I think you see a couple of things. I think you're right. I think they're built the right way. They got a great defensive line. They got a terrific offensive line. They're much more physical than Texas teams that we've seen in the past. I think Quinn Ewers is going to start Saturday. I'll be honest with you. I think you'll see Malik, but I think Quinn will start in this ball game. So what does that mean for them? Do they rally behind him? Here's the thing about Texas. You got to withstand the first quarter because, if you look at Sark over the years, his teams come out and they run 10, 11, 12, 14 plays that are just magical, But then when they settle into their offense, you can tend to sort of live with them, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
And so I think that's got to be the key for TCU. They got to have a fast start. They can't allow big plays by Texas early on. Somehow TCU has to have some success early to build confidence in a shaky team. And if they can do that, then I think they can hang with these guys throughout the day.
Do you think Sonny has handled so far what has to be a little bit of a frustrating year? He's not going to hold back on how he thinks. How's he handled 4 and 5?
Yeah, define handle. I mean, he's he's still talking to us, but I think he's frustrated. I think he's totally frustrated. But the thing about Sonny is he's always looking forward. So he's always talking about, okay, here's what we're going to do this week.
Yep.
Here's how we're going to get better this week. Here's what we need to improve on next year. And he's always thinking in those terms. He doesn't really look at that. It's really difficult. When I do a little pregame interview with him, and I always ask him about the previous week's game, and you can tell he's moved on. And he was that way when they were winning them, and now when you're kind of you're struggling in some of them. So I think the good news is he's always studying. He's always thinking about the next play, the next game, the next player. How does he get better? And so I think because of that, I think this team is ready to get back out there. And listen, Dave, you and I know that a game like Texas can cure what ails you. If TCU can come out and find a way, and they've had great success, won 8 of the last 11 against these guys. If they can find a way to beat Texas, then the rest of the year, it's not forgotten, but it feels a little better.
No question. Brian Estridge, voice of TCU, Texas and TCU, Saturday night, ABC at Amon Carter. This is 365 Sports. He is the voice of West Virginia Athletics. Tony Caridi with me, David Smoke on 365 Sports. What's it like, man? This program's playing games that matter in November. Yeah. And we know the story about where people thought they would be, and also Neil Brown with a chip on his shoulder. How much fun is it right now in Morgantown?
It's good. It's good to be back and winning because, to be quite honest with you, this is kind of, what we're used to. And having some subpar seasons obviously had great impact on everyone that follows the program. Obviously, you alluded to the preseason finish prediction of 14th, dead last in the league. And I do think, David, that they successfully took that, used it as motivation. They got through that really super rough stretch to open the season, which included opening the year at Penn State. And they went 3-1, and that was really the thing that turned them. We battled injuries. We've really not had the full complement of players offensively for much of the whole season. I think we're getting closer to that right now. In fact, against Oklahoma coming up this weekend, we should be probably as healthy as we've been on offense for the most part in a long time. So everyone's feeling good about it.
You run the ball, but not great. But you effectively grind people. And then obviously Garrett Green has given this team a toughness. Not that they didn't have some of that already, but it just seemed like he's that guy that everyone looks at. Not a great arm. He can run, but he just finds a way to win. How much of it is what he brings to the table?
Massive. So Neil is in his 5th season. This is the first time that he's had a quarterback that could legitimately threaten the defense with his legs. Garrett's that guy. And you just know how essential that is in today's football, that you have to have a quarterback that at times can extend a play, a quarterback that can just find a way to get a first down to keep the drive alive. And up until, Garrett, we really haven't had that guy. We've had more of a passing type of a quarterback. And, this offensive line, David, it was, from a personnel standpoint, in really poor shape when Neil took over. And he's built it up to the point now that you've got 2 definite guys that are going to play in the NFL. They're both from West Virginia. And a third that probably is going to get a really good chance who's also a West Virginia guy. So it's homegrown, it's built, and they'll go into Saturday's game leading the nation 12 consecutive games with 140 more rushing yards. Mm-hmm. And that's the longest active streak in the country. So they've been getting it done just the way he said. We're going to build the offensive line first, then we're going to run the ball.
So, Tony, Neil Brown, early in the year, questions about where he was, what his status was. You and I, we've talked about this before. And I was talking today on the show about, what Gundy's done at Oklahoma State's been great, whatever, and how Iowa State finishes with Matt Campbell, what Sark's done at Texas. But in your opinion, is Neil Brown in a legitimate conversation for Big 12 Coach of the Year?
Oh, wow. Well, I think he's a candidate. I mean, if a couple things happen. So
right.
He's got 3 left. You got OU, you've got Cincinnati, and then you've got your Bears. And if he comes into the home stretch out of this thing after being picked dead last, and he finishes up this season at 9-3, then absolutely a candidate for discussion. No question about that.
Right. I think so. I mean, there's a lot to. I just thought that the fact that I even brought that up is kind of the kind of year he's had. So it's a tough team. I brought about Garrett Green, the offensive linemen. You brought them up. The defense. They kind of just always find a way to keep things kind of dummied down a little bit. Not them, but their opponent. What's that coming from?
Well, the key there has been they made a major philosophical change in the offseason, David. We were just here's the word bad last year, and not only in how the thing played out, but just in alignment. And they looked at it strong during the offseason. They said, we're probably doing paralysis by analysis here. So they simplified. And they simplified, and they've gone just basically zone drops. They know where they need to go. They know where their landmarks are. That allows those defensive backs to keep their eyes on the quarterback. It's led to much more, many more interceptions. We had 4 total interceptions a year ago. Our cornerback, Beanie Bishop's got 4 by himself this year. So they simplified. They really focused and concentrated in the offseason on getting in alignment, especially for the teams that are playing tempo in this league, and we'll see it again on Saturday. And for the most part, they've done a good job. When they have not had great success this year, it's when they've been unable to get that force unit to pressure the quarterback. That happened at Houston, that happened against Oklahoma State, and it happened against Penn State. Those are the 3 losses. But the reason why the back half of the defense has been more efficient is because the front half of the defense has been able to pressure quarterbacks, get them out of their comfort zone, force some poor throws, and that'll be essential again this weekend.
I mentioned they haven't run the ball really well, but, man, they just hammered BYU. You kind of sat there with your jaw dropped at how one-sided that was?
Yeah, I never thought that was going to happen. Now, BYU's got its own issues, the quarterback situation with Keaton Slovis. But nevertheless, anytime you're able to do that at this level, that normally doesn't happen. And so, yeah, I was really happy with them. They took the ball on the toss of the coin. They went 75 yards. They set the tempo. They got a 4th down stop on BYU's first possession, and they scored again. And, again, it was one of those deals where the momentum just went. Control West Virginia, 14-0. BYU's trying to get this quarterback wired in. He did not play badly. He's going to start again for them this weekend. He's not bad, but, when you put someone in there the first time on the road, it was just one of those days. We've all been on both sides of those, and it mushroomed on them, and they were just never able to get any traction.
Last thing, they're playing in Norman. We brought that up. And, of course, Oklahoma has a huge record against most everybody except maybe Texas over the history of football. And they've won, I think, every time but once in Norman. But it's OU, and they're coming off a couple of losses in a row. It'd be unthinkable for 3 in a row, especially since they look so good early. But what would a win in Norman mean for this program?
Oh, goodness. It would be massive. It would be that signature win for Neil. David, 2 years ago when we were at their place, we have an illegal procedure on a 1st and goal.
I remember that. I do, yeah.
And then we had a snap. After that, we had a snap that went about literally 30 yards downfield, and they beat us on a walk-off field goal last time we were there. Last year, West Virginia beat them on a walk-off field goal. Mm-hmm. And so last 2 times we've competed with them. We've had some hellacious games with those dudes. Going back to Dana Holgerson, we had Tavon Austin, and we ran out of running backs, and they started him at running back. And he ran for 330-plus yards in that game. West Virginia lost 50-49. So we've had some games with them. This will be the last time, obviously, as Big 12 members, and probably, who knows if and when they'll ever play again. So it would be so big if West Virginia could find a way to steal one.
You're the best, man. Thank you, Tony, for giving me time today. We have a weekend coming up with more evidence afterwards, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, David.
Tony Caridi, the voice of West Virginia athletics on 365 Sports.